The Angels lose 2 out of 3 and make 2 trades this weekend, and they only use one of the players when they should have used maybe both of them. Would that have been helpful? I think so. Let's talk about it. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day, like Johnny Super Halo cousin Eric does every single day. Shout out to our cousin from Washington State. We love you. And you can find us anywhere you get your podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And the best way to help us out is by giving us a rate and a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're glad you're here. Make sure that you're subscribed and click that bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Happy Monday to you, and thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
Hey, my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we've been fans of this team for many years, and we saw some record-breaking stuff on Saturday. Unfortunately, the Halos walked away with a series loss against one of the worst teams in baseball. How the heck did that happen? Well, we're going to recap that in just a minute here. But first, Mike, there was a lot of moves happening for the Halos this weekend, and we want to get our listeners, our viewers, and our Lockdown Everydayers up to speed on what happened, because we have a lot of new faces on this team, right?
Yeah. I love the aggressiveness of Perry Manassi, and let me just say that right off the bat.
Yeah,
we lost with Rendon down, and then we're losing Urshela. I love that he just didn't settle for AAA players. I love that he didn't go off to the waiver wire and get a Jonathan VR, right? That was the moves last year, and Juan Lagares, right? That was a move last year. I love that he made a move and went out and got us 2 really good bats. Angels acquired Eduardo Escobar and cash considerations from the New York Mets in exchange for 2 minor league pitchers, Landon Marceau and Coleman Crow. Now, here's what's interesting, Johnny. The Mets are paying all of Escobar's salary except the required league minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And that they did that because they wanted to get the pitching prospects that they wanted. Now, remember, Billy Epler is their GM, so he's very familiar with Angel minor league players.
I have some thoughts about that, but continue.
Yes, I would love to hear your thoughts. John, here's Escobar's slash line before he joined the Angels since May 1st, 321, 379, 491 in 23 games. Johnny had 4 hits in 2 games this weekend. He really did make an impact, and I was really excited to see him there. And, of course, we did trade 2 young arms. So Coleman Crow was one. In 2019, he was drafted 28th overall. He had an overslot bonus out of high school. His fastball sits in the low 90s. He's got 2 breaking pitches. And then Landon Marceau was drafted in 2021, 3rd-round pick. He's got a low 90s fastball, and he relies on command and secondary pitches. Now, the report about Landon is that he pitched on Sunday and went 2 innings for the Mets minor leagues and gave up 5 runs and 5 hits. So he really struggled in his new surroundings. And then there's a report on Crow that he went to the IL, or was on the IL, because of elbow inflammation. And now they're saying possible Tommy John surgery. So those 2 guys were, I guess, high prospects and had a lot of high hopes, but we traded them away to get Escobar. And with Escobar joining our team, people have said that he's a great teammate, really funny guy. In fact, he was interviewed and he said, "I'm grateful that I don't have to face Shohei Ohtani anymore. And I'm grateful that I don't have to take a Mike Trout ground ball anymore." And so I love that. I love that he was on our team. Again, he had a really big impact this weekend on the Angels. Then the Angels made another trade the very next day after they beat the Rockies 25-1. John, talk about that trade.
Yeah, Mike Moustakas went from a team that just lost 25-1 to a team that just won 25-1, Mike, because Mike Moustakas has been on the Rockies this season, and the Angels traded for him and gave up a AA pitcher by the name of Connor Van Scoyoc. Van Scoyoc has been an interesting arm and has been in the Angels organization since 2018. He had a low 90s fastball. He added a cutter last year that produced a lot of swings and misses. He's also got a curveball, and he kind of figures to be a back of the rotation kind of guy. So that wasn't much in the way of giving up something for a piece that you need now, and I think Moustakas fills a lot of roles that we need. But let me go over his stats. Overall, this season, he's had a bit of a renaissance, Mike, because, you know, he spent some time in San Diego and just wasn't quite the moose that beat us up in the playoffs all those years ago and continued to beat us up while he was a Royal. But this season, he's batting .270. He's got a .310 on base, a .434 slugging, and a .744 OPS. Now, Mike, we're all familiar with Coors Field being a hitter-friendly ballpark, right? But get a load of these splits for Mike Moustakas at home at Coors Field for the Rockies. He's batting .212, a .312 on base, .462 slugging, a .773 OPS. Listen to these away numbers, and this is what gets me intrigued. .318 batting average, a .400 on base percentage,
wow,
.413 slugging, and an .813 OPS. I felt a little bad about this, but I get it because it's business. But Kevin Padlo was DFA'd right after that 25-1 game, a game that he was just in, by the way.
Yeah.
So that can't feel good. However, it was a necessary move to get Mike Moustakas. Mike, tell me your initial thoughts on these moves.
I see three pitchers, John, and all indications are these three pitchers are good young arms, but they slot in at the back of the rotation or maybe long relievers. And so this feels like the Hunter Renfroe trade. This feels like we gave up some possible potential good arms, but they really haven't performed. And now with the injuries and some of the things that have taken place since they were traded, like it does look good for the Halos. And quite honestly, this is why we draft the way that we draft. And this is why we have some of those assets so that we can actually feed the major league roster or make some trades. And with a draft coming up again, we can slowly refill and restock the minor leagues. And what happens with these guys is kind of what happens with teams that are in competition and are trying to get to the playoffs. And this is what we want. And so I know some people were like, man, it feels like Perry's trading away all our young arms. But remember, we still have Kai Busch, still have Chase Silseth. On the major league roster, we have Sam Bachman, we have Ben Joyce. All of the guys that we've been talking about for the last year and a half are still with us, and they're still involved, and they're going to have an impact on this team. And so I love these trades because, again, as I said at the top of the show, you have two injuries. One is out for the season. The other one, Rendon, will be back soon. But I love that these guys can slot in anywhere. Escobar can play second base and first base. Moustakas can play second base and first base. They both can play third base. And so I love having them around. And that's the other thing. He can play shortstop as well. And so I think that that's huge. I love that Fletch has come up. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think with Velasquez, I think that they have to give up that dream because I think that it's better to have a Fletch and an Escobar at shortstop than anybody else because they're going to give you solid defense, but they're also going to give you a bat that's going to make contact and not swing and miss or pop out.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that move was made for Escobar on Friday. He jumped right into the lineup. Of course, we'll talk about his performance on Saturday. But again, you add somebody to fill that need, especially that Gio Urshela need. And I'm glad that they didn't stop with that and that Fletch was promoted because you and I had said, who can replace Gio Urshela? Well, Fletcher could do it. But they went out and got another piece anyway. Yeah. And then also brought up David Fletcher, which I think was necessary. And then Moustakas, too. I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but Jared Walsh was sent down to AAA. And he obviously has some things to work on since he's come back from, being on the IL with all the neurological issues. He looked really good in AAA before he came back up to the big league. I just don't think it was enough time for him.
Yeah, I think that Walshy's down there for the rest of the year based off of these two moves that Perry made. I think that they need to give Walshy some time, and I think he's down there for the rest of the year. And he might pop up maybe at the end of the year when the rosters expand, but I don't think that we see him, if we make the playoffs, I don't think we see him on the playoff roster or anything like that, unless they need like a defensive replacement late in the game. But I think he's down there for the rest of the season.
So you make a good point, and I think about Escobar being a veteran presence. I think about Mike Moustakas being somebody who's been there before as a World Series winner and part of that really great Royals team for those middle 2010 seasons. And then even Rendon, who's been there before with the Nationals in 2019. You've added a lot of veteran presence to this team, not just in the sense that it's good for the locker room, but guys who can go out there and perform well. And so again, if you look at Escobar's overall season numbers, they weren't fantastic. But the reason why you brought up May and just the way he's been heating up in his last few games, he was getting inconsistent playing time in New York because Matt Beatty is the third baseman that they're all very excited about. And so, Eduardo Escobar was kind of a stop for the Mets and wanting to move up their prospects.
Yeah.
And then with Moustakas, honestly, I didn't realize that he was healthy and playing on the Rockies actively.
Right. Neither did I.
But I think he adds that bat that we have been missing offensively from Jared Walsh. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, there's something that we want to get to from Sunday's game regarding Mike Moustakas, and we'll talk about that in our third segment as we recap that Sunday game. Don't forget that the Angels are playing the White Sox tonight, 6:38 Pacific time. Dylan Cease versus Reed Detmers, Mike. And the Angels starters this week all had pretty good outings. Some of them were great, and some of them were good, and some of them were right in the middle. And Detmers had one against the Dodgers last week, and he looked really great. Dylan Cease, obviously, is an intriguing arm that we might look at for a starting position. However, he's currently on the White Sox, and we're playing them tonight. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Just search Angels, and coming up on Locked On Angels, we had some highs and some halos this weekend. We're going to talk about the losses and all of the record-setting performances that took place. We'll talk about that coming right up.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. Same goes when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time that you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part needs to fit right, and it will fit right the first time around. Just add your car to the My Garage and look for the green check mark, and you'll know the part will fit or your money back. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. Get the right parts, the right fit at the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Locked On Everydayers, join us every day this week as we recap this series against the White Sox. We need some wins this week, and so we're going to be here breaking down what happened the night before, getting into some interesting conversations and topics that arise throughout the week. We'll be talking about all of that, so join us every day this week as we talk about this series against the White Sox. They're playing those White Sox tonight at 6:38 Pacific time. You can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels.
Johnny, let me take everybody back to Friday's game against the Colorado Rockies, a weekend series that we thought we would really do well in, and we were doing well in this game. We were up 4-2, and then some terrible miscues on the field, and specifically one from a throw from Walshy to Andrew Velasquez at second base, to which you tweeted out, Andrew, catch the ball, right? Because
it went right to your glove,
it
bro.
was right in his glove, and he's in there for defensive purposes, and that would have been out number 2, and then there would have been some other things that would have taken place, and so we may not have been down 7-4 at that moment, but Davinsky comes in, and Chris Davinsky is a guy who has done well with runners in scoring position and inherited runners, but his last couple of outings, he's really not been the same Chris Davinsky that we've seen prior to this.
He's hanging that changeup, Mike. If you go back and look at every hit that he's given up, he's not locating that changeup. It's middle. It's not down. It's just hanging up for guys to hit. And of course, he's going to give up a grand slam in Coors Field where the altitude is, you can barely breathe up there. And it's a hanging changeup. It's a batting practice ball at that point.
Yeah, the Angels were like Duncan Sheik, barely breathing.
Oh, Lord.
Trout and Ohtani had back-to-back home runs again. This is the 9th time that they've done it, 4th time this season, and they crushed those pitches, and it was great to see. Obviously, Ohtani's having a great year. It's great to see Trout kind of break out, and I think this weekend was one of those weekends where, we're starting to see that Mike Trout again, and I think playing at Coors Field was really helpful to that. And this, by the way, their back-to-back home runs ties for the most by any Angels duo. Of course, Trout and Pujols were leading in that. Now they're tied, Trout and Ohtani. And Johnny,
it was sets of home runs in a season that they both have 9. And
yes,
so they still have some catching up to do all time. But as far as hitting 9 in one season, I mean, they're off to a good start, Mike. It's only June.
Right. Yeah. Got a few months ahead of them. Johnny, the big story for the Angels outside of that hanging changeup was Sandoval. He was pitching and he just was getting hit, and he gave up 10 hits in this game and didn't look like the Sandoval against the Royals that we thought maybe he could carry that over and pitch against the Rockies in this one.
Yeah, it's these guys really struggle with that altitude, and it's for a good reason, because the stuff on your pitches doesn't move the way that it normally does lower to the ground. But also, if you go out there throwing your fastball in the same arm slot that you usually throw it, you're going to find that it hangs up a little bit more.
Yeah,
and so there's an adjustment period for these visiting pitchers to come in and figure that out. And so, yeah, he got hit around. Mike, he only gave up 3 runs. And like you mentioned, the Angels had the lead. It was a close one, but they had the lead in that game. Unfortunately, Chris Davinsky gave up that grand slam.
I think Sandy had the same issue that Esteves had when he was there. It seemed like when he would throw his fastball, it just wouldn't do what he wanted it to do. That's why he was much better away from Coors Field. So Angels lose that one 7-4. And then before Saturday's game, Johnny, some transactions. We learned about the Eduardo Escobar official transaction, but then we also learned that David Fletcher is back. People have been calling for him. There was a great interview with Sam Blum and David Fletcher. You should check that out at The Athletic, because David was like, I didn't really have any contact with the major league club. We really weren't talking. That I didn't know what they wanted me to work on, which kind of makes sense why he was just kind of lingering and languishing in the minor leagues, right?
Yeah, and then I think he just needed to get right. I think he just needed to play his game and do his thing. He was injured last season, and so we didn't see much of him. And we were hoping that a healthy Fletcher coming into this season was going to make a difference. Unfortunately, he wasn't getting the playing time he needed to get right. Yeah. And on that same note, they sent Jared Walsh and Michael Stefanik down to Salt Lake. And again, it goes back to, you got to give guys every day at bats so that they can get right in the box and start hitting the ball well, because we've seen Walsh play a great first base, and we've even seen him connect really hard on some pitches and hit some doubles and hit a home run. It just wasn't enough, and I think he needs more consistent playing time. That's what David Fletcher did this season. Now he's back. He had himself a game, Mike. I mean, everybody in this one had a game. So let's take it from the top here. The Angels win this one 25-1, a franchise record in terms of runs scored. They broke that on Saturday. They also had 28 hits, also broke a franchise record. Every starter got a hit and an RBI. Mike Trout, 3 for 3. He came out of the game early, because what's the point in leaving in one of your best guys in there when you're up that much? Hunter Renfroe, who played first base for the first time this season, went 5 for 5, 4 RBIs and a walk. Eduardo Escobar was 2 for 4 with 4 runs scored in his debut. Yeah. Fletcher had 4 hits, 5 RBIs. He actually scored the first 2 runs of the game with runners in scoring position. Then he had a 3-run home run into the corner, which was hilarious to me. Noted home run hitter David Fletcher. Mickey Moniak, man, had a game. 5 for 5, 4 RBIs, 4 runs. Tried to hit for the cycle, tripped rounding first.
Oh, man, that was
did
awful.
the whirly bird. That was we were all concerned, like, don't hurt yourself. Trout, Drury, and Theis had back-to-back home runs on 3 first pitches. So each of those guys, the first pitch, they hit out for a home run. It was a 13-run top of the third, again, setting franchise records all around, and then 4 home runs in that inning where they did go back-to-back. Moniak hit a home run later in that inning. That ties an Angels franchise record. 4 home runs in 1 inning. Really awesome. Then we can't overlook the pitching performance of Griffin Canning, especially considering they were at Coors Field, right?
Yeah, Griffin Canning, 6 innings, 4 hits, 7 Ks, and he just looked like he was in cruise control. I mean, the guy was just fantastic, and he has been our best pitcher outside of Shohei Ohtani this season, and he gets a career-high 6th major league win this season, and that's awesome for him, and so I'm glad that he's in this starting rotation. Who would have thought he would have been, I said this before, who would have thought he would have been our 2nd best pitcher that was on this team? And Johnny, what's interesting about what we saw with Fletch coming back up was runners in scoring position. He has always been kind of a catalyst for that. And then being able to actually get it started with a 2-run single and get this momentum moving forward. Johnny, one question for you. Is Mickey Moniak just the guy that has to start now in every single game? I know we did a segment about how we're comfortable with Ward and Moniak kind of popping in every once in a while. Does that need to switch now?
Man, it's that giving him at bats against lefties. I think you got to give it a shot. He's just so worth being in there every single day. I think that Moniak has earned that right. I think the idea of putting Renfroe at first was so that they could get Moniak in there more days. Mike, I don't think that Taylor Ward needs to be in there every single day. I think Mickey Moniak needs to be in there every day because he's earned it. I know that we've had that conversation about Ward does better with consistency, but at this point, Moniak's a stud, man, and he just deserves to be in there. He is earning that status as a number one pick. And then considering David Fletcher, again, he's not going to be your world changer, obviously, but he is so solid defensively. Mike, I didn't realize this, but you remember that he went on the bereavement list.
Yeah.
David Fletcher lost his father on Father's Day. And so that's why he was on the bereavement list. So just the magic of baseball is him coming back to the team and having the night that he had. Obviously, him and the rest of the Angels didn't have as great of a day on Sunday, and we'll talk about that. But just coming back the way that he did and scoring the first 2 runs, playing a great game, hitting that 3-run home run. It's really great to see Fletcher back. He's somebody whose numbers are not going to dazzle you and jump off the page all the time, but he's somebody that you can root for, and I think that's why he has such support from the Angel fans all over the place.
Johnny, let's go to Sunday. Talk about yesterday's game. It was a 4-3 loss. The Halos lose that one, which is frustrating, right? We scored so many runs. We had a 20-plus.
Who would have saw that coming?
Right. And that was one of those things that everybody was nervous about. Like, could we have saved some runs? 1 run. Could we save 1 run? Right. But
on that note, on the radio broadcast, Mark Langston, Terry Smith made a joke like, Mark, do you think they should have saved some runs? And Mark was like, no. You keep up the momentum and you keep going. You don't stop. You keep adding on. And I like that mentality because everybody jokes about, oh, you should have saved some runs for another game. But no, you just keep doing what you did the night before. And I can't understand, Mike, how this Halo team doing what they did on Saturday and then having pretty much the same lineup as Saturday night. They go out against statistically the worst starting pitcher in the league, and he looks like an ace. Why do we always do that to these guys and make them look like aces every single time we face somebody like this?
Yeah. John started the show by saying that we have been fans of this team for years and years and years and years and years. And fans of this team know that the Angels are really good at making terrible pitchers look good. And that's what they did on Sunday.
And the other thing is Paul Holden, who does Locked On Rockies, we were going back and forth about Friday's game and Saturday's game, and he was feeling down about the 25-1 victory, but he also said, hey, but thank you for breaking our Grand Slam drought. And it's like, yeah, of course we did, because it's the Angels. And whenever there's a struggling team, the Angels help them find a way to get back over the hump and get back and get right again. So what is this juju that we have?
They lost 8 in a row before they came in to play us. And then they came back because of a hanging changeup, and then they win the series. And I get it. It's frustrating because this team is so much better than that. And these are the games that we should be winning. And quite honestly, John, I was kind of impressed with Tyler Anderson yesterday. He pitched really well, 6 innings, 4 hits, 3 runs, 9 Ks. Really looked like the Tyler Anderson of last season. We just couldn't get him much offense. Now, Ohtani did his job, RBI triple. Moniak had an RBI double. Angels had a chance in the 9th inning because of Moniak's RBI double. It was 4-3. And then the tension became, well, we're going to pinch hit. And John, everybody thought it was going to be Mike Moustakas, and it was going to be him coming back against his former team and possibly able to help the Angels tie this game. And then it was Luis Rengifo that came off the bench. Was that a mistake, do you think?
A huge mistake. Huge. Trying to see how I can get my voice to go.
That was good.
Luis Rengifo from the left side is not even as good as Luis Rengifo from the right side. And in this case, he was batting left. Why not bring in Mike Moustakas? I understand his batting average is .212 at Coors Field, and he's better away. We just got through talking about that. But if anybody's going to hit one out, it's going to be Mike Moustakas, and it's going to be against his former team. It's going to be the magic of baseball. I get it. I'm making up stuff here on the spot, but I'm just saying, why don't you go with that choice? Why do you go with something you've seen 100 times in Luis Rengifo? Why would you not give that moment to Mike Moustakas? Now, before we continue, I just want to say that if they had pinch hit Mike Moustakas
Good job.
in that moment and he blew it, then, we'd be complaining about something else, right? That's usually how this works.
Sure.
But I'm just saying, I just would have gone for it. I mean, if anybody's going to give you a chance to hit one into the gap or hit one over the wall, it's going to be Moose, right?
This is why you get new toys. Play with the new toys. Like, this is why he's on the team, and you just traded for him. This is a great opportunity. And so it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense in that moment. And then afterwards, Erica Weston asks Phil Nevin, like, was there any hesitation? Like, were you thinking about going to anybody else but Rengifo there? No. And then she was like, cool, and moved on. Like,
I'm not following up on that. Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't follow up on that either. But I mean, it was just one of those things where it's like, come on, Phil, like, use the new toy that you have, because one of them has worked out really great. And now that you got Moose, maybe he's hurt. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't ready. Who knows? Right. But like, we don't know the behind the scenes stuff, but it would have made more sense. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I would have not been as frustrated if it was Moustakas grounding out or flying out in that moment rather than Louis Rengifo, because we have seen, as you've mentioned, we've seen Rengifo 100 times, and maybe he's come through like 2 or 3 times. It would be great to see somebody who has come through in the past in that moment, and with a thin air at Coors Field, maybe perhaps gets under a ball and hits a bomb, and the Angels find themselves with a 1-run lead.
Exactly. It was disappointing weekend and a disappointing week overall.
Yeah.
Like they lost 4 out of 5 games this week. Thank goodness they only played 5 games and not 7, because who knows what this could have looked like. Those 2 games against the Dodgers and these 3 games against the Rockies, we had 5 great pitching performances and only 1 win to come away with. And it was a 25-1 win. And so it was just an awful week all around, but I'm encouraged by the pitching performances, especially like Tyler Anderson in Coors Field, not blowing it like he usually does. And then Reed Detmers looked fantastic against the Dodgers on Tuesday. Ohtani looks like he got right because he had a great outing, only 1 run surrendered on a home run to Freddie Freeman, of all people. So again, I'm encouraged by the pitching performances. But you're right. Phil's got to use the new toys. He's got to put together a lineup that makes sense. There needs to be some more consistency. I mean, the Angels grounded into 4 double plays on Sunday. 2 of them were Hunter Renfroe in big spots who, coming off that 5-for-5 game, you think, oh, this is great. But then he goes out and does his usual Hunter Renfroe thing, which is not delivering with runners in scoring position. So there needs to be a lineup shakeup. There needs to be some movement, because it's just way too back and forth. It's just way too inconsistent. I want to see Moniak leading off. I want to see Taylor Ward lower in the lineup. I want to see Renfroe not in a spot where there's always guys on base and he's swinging at the slider away. I don't want to see that anymore. I don't want to see him rolling over into a double play. So again, I think there needs to be some serious shaking up with this week against the White Sox.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. John just mentioned it. We're going to be playing the White Sox tonight at 6:38 Pacific time. Johnny, I think Moniak needs to be in right field, and I think that it'd be great to see Escobar at third, and it would be great to see Moose at first. I think we got to use those toys, right? And we're pitching against Dylan Cease. So those left-handed bats, I think, will be really beneficial against him. And you can catch every pitch of the Angels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Angels.
Hey, give us a follow at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Well, the Angels do play the White Sox, and we're going to break down Reed Detmers' start, and hopefully Reed can continue with his dominant performance. He's had 3 really strong starts, so we're hopeful that he can do that against Dylan Cease tonight. And Cease is a wild card, Johnny, because he is somebody that could come in and completely blow up, or he could come in and blow us up. And so we're going to recap that game tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
Looking forward to that conversation. Hopefully the Angels can go out there and get a win tonight. They need to go 3-2 for the rest of the month in order to get to 15 wins. Can they do it? We'll talk about it this week. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here for more Locked On Angels.